Good morning. I have an interesting offer for you, which could turn out to be really useful during your work on building a house. I'd like to invite you to take part in a special video course, entirely dedicated to the topic of air recuperation in a single-family home. Prepared based on the knowledge and experience of the companies Peflex and Renet, I know you care about the quality and efficiency of the house you're building. The recuperation system, that is, mechanical ventilation with heat recovery, is a key element of modern construction projects. It allows you to maintain high air quality inside the building, while also increasing its energy efficiency. This video course will, first of all, provide you with knowledge about how the recuperation system works and the benefits of using it. Secondly, it will show you how to install and maintain a mechanical ventilation system. Thirdly, it will give you practical tips on design and installation that are hard to find in textbooks. And fourth, it's completely free. You don't have to overpay elsewhere. If you're an installer, you'll supplement or upgrade your technical knowledge. You'll be able to offer your clients much more advanced solutions. You'll gain new opportunities to sell your services. If you're a private client and you're building your dream home, you'll find out what to pay attention to at different stages of construction, such as design, choosing solutions, or the installation of the heat recovery system itself. You'll improve your quality of life and take care of your family's health. You'll lower the operating costs of your building. You'll increase its value on the real estate market. The course is available online on the YouTube platform on the tsinnic24.pl channel. It's a great opportunity to develop your skills and gain valuable knowledge whenever you have the time and feel like it, with no time limits or fees. The entire course consists of a theoretical part, where we will provide you with knowledge and information, and a practical part prepared on-site during the installation of the recuperation system. Visit us at tsinnic24.pl. Hello everyone. Today's meeting will actually be the opening session of our ventilation course, or rather, topics related to ventilation. So, why do we humans need ventilation, really? What is it like? How does it affect our health and well-being? In other words, why do we need clean, fresh air? The main task of ventilation is to remove pollutants generated inside the rooms we occupy as people, but it also serves to separate us from what is outside the room. Here, in this case, I'm talking, for example, about smog, but let's start with what's inside the rooms, and why we actually use ventilation. So, clean air is fundamentally important for our health and well-being. This is especially important indoors, inside enclosed spaces, where we spend about 70 or even 90% of our time during the day in closed rooms, at home, in the office, or even in the car. So effective ventilation affects not only our health and well-being, but also the technical condition of our building, our home. This is because it helps prevent physical damage to the structure, for example, mold outbreaks caused by excessive moisture in the building. So the primary task, the main role of ventilation in rooms, is to remove pollutants and bring in fresh, clean air in their place. Ventilation must meet one of several conditions, that is, to dilute or eliminate natural contaminants, such as metabolic carbon dioxide, whose main source is us, humans. The removal of chemical substances that are emitted, for example, from furniture, carpets, building materials, or cleaning agents. Providing fresh air, mainly, we mean ensuring an adequate amount of oxygen, which our bodies use to produce energy for every cell in our body. Dilution or elimination of identifiable pollutants, such as odors from the kitchen, toilet, or bathroom. And one of the last points is controlling the humidity of the air in the room. Indoor air pollution. A large number of pollutants are generated by ourselves, by people, such as smoking tobacco or other gases, but also organic or inorganic elements appear in our air. Inorganic ones include, for example, dust or fibers, or even living particles, living components, such as fungal spores, viruses, or bacteria, which are generated inside rooms, inside our homes. It's well known that pollutants are harmful to our health, as well as to our comfort when staying in such rooms. But as I mentioned, they also affect the very structure of the walls, floors, or ceilings, mainly due to the development of mold spores. In fact, in rooms with poor ventilation, the amount of polluted or more polluted air can be up to 8 times higher than the air outside. I would like to discuss the issue related specifically to carbon dioxide and oxygen. Why do we as humans need oxygen? Because oxygen takes part in what I call the equation of life. So, every one of our cells needs energy to perform its function, like breathing, functions, breathing, moving your hand like this, or even the whole process of thinking, speaking, and so on. All the cells within our human body absolutely require a constant supply of energy, so when we effectively utilize the vital resources meticulously stored within our body in the essential form of readily available fuel, such as various sugars, plus the crucial element of oxygen, the fundamental elements that ultimately result from this intricate and vital chemical reaction are metabolic carbon dioxide, which we naturally and effortlessly exhale with every single breath we take, as well as the equally important byproduct of water, or rather, moisture. But above all, these sugars plus oxygen provide energy to every cell in our body. When it comes to the amount of water produced, for example, in an hour, it ranges from 30 to 400 grams, depending on what we are doing in our physical activity, right? Our brain, yes, or our mental abilities, decrease when there is too high a concentration of carbon dioxide in the air. In the air, in the room where we are staying. We as humanity, really as people, when we first stood up on 2 legs, the concentration of carbon dioxide in the Earth's air was about 300 ppm, yes, the concentration of carbon dioxide. And over the last few hundred years, or actually over the last 200 years, that concentration has risen even to the level of 450 ppm. It is generally accepted that, depending on the environment, on the location, the outdoor concentration, let's call it the background concentration, is somewhere between 350 and 450 ppm. As I mentioned, yes, too high a concentration of carbon dioxide affects our concentration, our ability to think logically, our functioning, right? Studies have been conducted on 2 groups of people who were given exactly the same task to perform. One group was in a room where the concentration of carbon dioxide was at most 800 to 1000 ppm, while the other group was in a room where the concentration exceeded 1500 and reached up to 2000 ppm. The difference in speed or in the number of mistakes made by the group in the room with poorer air quality reached as much as 30 to 50%. So, let's truly try to make absolutely sure that the air we spend our valuable time in is of proper and excellent quality, meaning with the lowest possible concentration of carbon dioxide. Break time equals 0.5s/, which is crucial for our well-being. The higher the concentration of carbon dioxide, the more our mental performance drops, and as the amount of carbon dioxide outside also increases, if we as humanity don't stop producing more of it, we're basically paving the way for artificial intelligence, AI, to take over the world. It sounds strange, but that's the path of evolution, right? So the main reason we use ventilation is to maintain the proper concentration of carbon dioxide. An additional function that ventilation serves is to provide the right thermal comfort. What is thermal comfort? Thermal comfort it's mainly about temperature, humidity, but also the movement of air in a given room. So if any of these parameters go outside the accepted range, we feel uncomfortable being in such a room, and that's connected, among other things, to temperature. It's generally accepted that the optimal temperature for us, for people staying indoors, is between 18 and 22 degrees. Outside of this range, we feel either too cold or too hot. As for humidity, the range is from 40 to 60%. For example, in a dry sauna, we can withstand higher air temperatures around 80, 90, or even 100 degrees, but I don't think any of us, or most of us, could handle more than 50 or 60 degrees in a wet sauna. So here we have another parameter, as well as the parameter related to air movement, that is, the speed at which the air moves in the room we're in. It's generally accepted that the optimal value is 0.2 meters per second in the area where people are present. The area where people are present is roughly from 50 centimeters up to 2 meters above the floor. That's the area where people are present, but you also have to take into account, for example, children and infants, right? So, for small children who are crawling or spend most of their time on the floor, we also need to ensure proper comfort there, in terms of air movement and thermal comfort, right? That means temperature, humidity, as well as the same air movement. We're talking about air humidity, whether it's too low or too high. The main problem is our resistance to viruses when the humidity is too low, because too low humidity weakens our line of defense, that is, the amount of mucus in our nose, eyes, or on our lips. And in fact, a relative air humidity of 40% or higher can almost completely eliminate the risk of infection with several types of viruses. That's why controlling the humidity level indoors is especially important and recommended. And research shows that as much as 77% of infectious flu viruses can still remain infectious even after an hour, as long as the relative air humidity is 23% or less. However, if the relative humidity rises to 40% or more, the infectivity drops sharply, leaving only about 14% of viruses in the air capable of further infection. It was also found that higher air humidity caused the influenza virus to become inactive after a short period of time. Even after just 15 minutes, it had practically lost its ability to infect. This phenomenon is one of the reasons why influenza viruses hit us humans harder during the winter months, that is, when the air outside has low absolute humidity, which also translates to lower relative humidity. That's why in the summer, when the relative humidity indoors is at the optimal level, around 40 to 60%, we don't experience attacks, that is, infections by influenza viruses in humans. But during the winter months, when heating systems are turned on indoors, at home, in the office, and the relative humidity starts to drop, we need to ensure better conditions for ourselves, for people, and make it harder for flu viruses to thrive. Another issue arises when there is too much humidity indoors, and in such cases, we usually deal with mold. What is mold? Mold consists of mold fungi. They are microscopic plants, parasites. Its spores, just like flower pollen, are carried by air currents. Mold forms colonies on damp leaves, the trunks of old trees, as well as in humid and warm rooms. For fungi, especially favorable conditions for growth and development are positive temperatures and relative air humidity exceeding 60%, when a film forms on surfaces like walls or windows, on which mold can develop. Walls covered with mold not only ruin the appearance and damage building materials, but most importantly, they have a particularly negative impact on human health. Health disorders related to exposure to mold fungi, for example in apartments, are referred to as sick building syndrome. This can also be called the sick building syndrome, or even chronic fatigue syndrome. So what we might describe as, "Oh, I'm tired, I didn't sleep well," mold fungi could also be the reason for our poor well-being or even affect our health. Apart from the health aspect, another important issue worth mentioning when it comes to mold fungi is their impact on construction, building materials, and other items like books or clothes, where fungi can cause damage to these objects or, as I said, even to building structures themselves. It is estimated that, globally, losses in the construction industry caused by mold can reach as much as 2% of GDP. Okay, we've discussed issues like air quality and potential hazards inside the building, but now let's talk about what's outside and what the ventilation system can also protect us from, or what it can shield us against. Yes. Maybe one of those less noticeable elements, which is also important when it comes to ventilation, is the noise generated outside the building, from which we are separated, for example, by closed windows, doors, or other barriers. But again, when we close the windows and doors, we're actually cutting ourselves off or separating ourselves from the stream of outside air, which means we're left with the indoor air, the air that we ourselves can pollute by producing things like carbon dioxide or water vapor. So the issue of separating ourselves from the outside conditions, like I said, is about noise, but another factor that affects our health is smog. What is smog? We can divide smog into two elements, or rather, into two types of smog. We have summer smog, which is mainly related to pollution caused by the sun, that is, by the production of ozone, as well as by pollution generated, for example, by transportation, yes, worn out, tires. They generate rubber particles, right, which also float in the air and affect air quality, that is, they contribute to this summer smog. But the main factor that affects our health is this winter smog, where during the heating periods, yes, during the heating season, air quality is closely linked to the amount of particulate matter, suspended particles, which really have a negative impact on our health. Numerous studies have shown a strong correlation between the air quality index and our health. They also show that suspended particulate matter, PM, has a negative effect on our health, as do other pollutants present in this winter smog. The main components of smog particulates are actually sulfates, nitrates, ammonia, sodium chloride, soot, mineral dust, particles resulting from combustion processes, and water. Smog consists of a mixture of solid and liquid particles, as well as organic and inorganic substances suspended in the air. Studies have shown that smog is responsible for about 45 to 50,000 additional deaths per year in our country, that is, in Poland. The impact of particulate matter on human health has been widely studied in the past. These studies show that fine dust can pose a serious threat to our health. The most important diseases associated with people staying in rooms with air polluted by PM1 particles include allergies, asthma, lung cancer, cardiovascular diseases, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and even dementia. In addition, there is strong evidence regarding the effects of exposure to particles of various size ranges, and PM1 particles, in particular, weaken our throat, larynx, that is, the upper part of the respiratory tract. PM2.5 particles affect lung function disorders, eye diseases, or skin conditions, while PM1 particles enter our bloodstream and are carcinogenic factors that can cause cancer. Do we have the ability to protect ourselves from smog? Probably yes. We can move to another area where the air is cleaner, or use the appropriate class of filters in our ventilation system. Because the main task, or maybe rather, the additional task of air filters and HVAC systems, that is, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, is not only to protect the ventilated rooms from too high a level of pollution, but also to protect the system itself, for example, the ventilation system. And the law requires that the minimum quality of the filter installed in the ventilation system must be Class G4. Class G4 is a filter class that captures particles much larger than PM10. That's why, for our health, it should be assumed that the minimum filtration class of the filter in a ventilation device or system should be Class N5, or alternatively EPM10 with at least 50% efficiency. What does that mean? It means that such a filter captures at least 50% of particles of PM10 size. The higher the class, the higher the filter rating, the greater the filtration efficiency of air pollutants. And so, we assume that starting from this G class, through class M and F, we even reach HEPA filters, which capture 100%, 99% of suspended dust, but they also trap biological particles, such as viruses or bacteria, or even mold, right? So let's try, at least as much as possible and depending on the season, to use the appropriate filter class in order to properly filter the air that is supplied to our rooms in our building. So, to sum up this part about ventilation and how air quality, or the air itself, affects our health. So, do we need air to live? Let's do a quick test. After plugging your nose, how long can you survive without taking your next breath? Is it a minute, 2, or maybe 10 minutes? Sure, trained and practiced people can last longer, but in reality, our body needs air, and above all, it needs oxygen. If we don't supply oxygen to our body, the first organ to die is the brain. Does air quality, and the air itself, affect our health? Yes. When it comes to what is produced inside rooms, meaning what we ourselves generate, that's mainly metabolic carbon dioxide. We should try to keep its level in our rooms at a maximum of 1,200 ppm. As for humidity, we also have an influence on its level. If the humidity is too low, we can use an additional humidifier, preferably an evaporative one, which will increase the humidity in rooms where it's too low. Can we influence lowering the humidity? Yes. In the summer, we should use air conditioning devices. The first thing, or the first task, that an air conditioner performs is not lowering the temperature, but actually reducing the humidity in the room, and as a result, the temperature also drops. The impact on bacteria, viruses, mold, right? It all depends on how we control the relative humidity of the air in our rooms. Do we have any influence over outside pollution? Yes. We can use the right quality of filters, the right class of filters with the appropriate, as appropriate. The right filtration class can ensure that the air is filtered so that the air entering our rooms is as clean as possible. If, for example, we need to purify the air even more than what the filter provides, we can always use air purifiers that are installed or placed in our rooms. Whether that's with a HEPA filter or, for example, with electrostatic filters. This way, the air that has already been pre-filtered by the ventilation or heat recovery system can be further purified inside our rooms. So, what can we do, right? Let's try, let's make sure, let's take care to ensure that the air in our homes is the best it can possibly be. And on that optimistic note, I would like to invite you to the next parts of our ventilation course, where we will discuss both the practical and theoretical aspects of how to properly install a mechanical supply and exhaust ventilation system with heat recovery, commonly known as recuperation. Thank you.